Hello everyone, today I want to show you a way to create 100% procedural grass with a procedural shader. There is no image texture needed and no modeling. Of course we can control the density of our grass, the size, the bending factor, and of course we can switch between brown grass and green grass. And of course we can modify the grid, the landscape. So if you want to know how to create that, just watch that video. So we will start with our default cube and we will create a new geometry node setup, disconnect input from output. This time we will need the group input later on. And we will start with creating one grass leaf with a mesh line. And it's important that we work in real world measurements. So let's first connect the mesh line with the geometry. And we will give the mesh line a height of maybe 0.07. That's about 7 centimeters. I guess that's the average height of a grass leaf. And now we need a set position node. Plug it between mesh line and group output. And now first of all, we want to give our grass halm, our grass leaf, some kind of rotation. Therefore, we will need a vector rotate node. Vector rotate node. We will need a position node. We will need a math node that we set to multiply. We will need an index node. And that's all for now. We will add some additional nodes later on, but now I will explain what these nodes do. First of all, the mesh line consists of several points, vertices, and with the index climbs up from 0 to 10, or I think 9 it's in that case. And you can imagine that as some kind of loop, and that loop here, as we connect this with the position input, that loop goes through every instance, through every vertice, and the index counts, adds each time the loop is added 1. So where's our mesh? So you can imagine that the first index point 0, it's banded with 0. So the second one is banded a little bit more, the third one even a little bit more, and so on and so on. So now we connect the position node and now plug in the position node, because we have to get the positions of every vertex point with the vector and the multiply with our angle. First of all, we can try it this, and as you can see, nothing is happening. That's why we have to define the axis the mesh line is bending around. So we will decide to choose our x-axis. I think you can choose the y-axis. That doesn't matter, I think. But for the sake of this tutorial, please choose the x-axis. And as you can see now, our grass leaf is bending. But you can also see that the parameter is very sensitive. That's why I added that multiply node. And that's why I copy that, plug that right here, and I set this to divide. And it's divided by maybe 100. And now we have a much smoother control about our grass leaf. So next thing, maybe we can group that, hit Ctrl J, and rename that mesh bending. And now we want to give our grass leaf some kind of thickness. Therefore, we have to, first of all, we have to convert our mesh into a curve. And therefore we will need a mesh to curve node. There it is. Mesh to curve node. And we will need a set curve. Where is it? Set curve radius node. And we will need a color ramp node. Color ramp. And we will need a spline parameter node. Where is it? There it is. If you work with Blender 3.0, you won't find that spline parameter node. In Blender 3.0, it's called curve parameter node, and it only has one output, I think. But I think it should work with that node too. Otherwise, download Blender 3.1. So let's go on, and to give our grass leaf some kind of thickness, we have to add a curve to mesh node, because there we can define some kind of profile, and we will need a curve line. The curve line will be our profile. So now, first of all, let's see what happens when we plug in the profile. Something strange happens, because we defined the set length, but at the beginning where is it? We said we want to bend around the x-axis. Here it is. So now we have to give the x-axis thickness, and as you can see, it's a very bright leaf. Maybe we can set it to 0.1. I think that matches more with the shape of a leaf. And now we want to have a little bit more control of our leaf. So we will do that with our spline parameter. The spline parameter node gives us the control from the beginning to the endpoint of our curve. Plug that into the vector and the color input into the radius of our curve radius. Actually, I think we can set this parameter to 1 meter, so we have more control with our color here. So when we set the white now to something more dark, you can see we have a little bit more control about it. That's better than to use it here with the curve line parameters. And now we also can define the shape of our grass. For example, something like that. And now we can also define something in the midpoint. So maybe something like that. And I think that pretty looks like some kind of grass leaf. So I think now it's time to set a material. And for that we will of course need a set material node. The reason why I set the material here is because I want to assign the material to each single grass leaf and not to the whole bunch of grass leaves. That gives us a little bit more control. So of course I've already created some grass material. I called it Procedural Grass. So let's have a quick look to my material, Procedural Grass. Therefore I created a temporary material plane, because I don't want to assign my material to the geometry nodes object. By the way, I can rename that geometry nodes. I name that geometry nodes grass group. So I activate the material plane and I activate it, and I've already assigned it the material to my plane. So I've created a texture coordinate node with the created output, set it to mapping, and I had to relocate my gradient texture and my noise texture a little bit because it was a little bit offset. So it was not just right here in the middle. So I had to replace it just here in the middle. And the gradient texture goes into a color ramp with some grass colors. And I think it's pretty important that you use cool, realistic colors. I can show you mine. That's the hex colors 536F00, and there's a brighter one, C7E67F. I think there's another one, it's a different one, 8D9E11. And these two now goes into UE saturation nodes. One of them goes into my base color. And the important one is that the geometry node with backfacing, because we cannot simulate some subsurface scattering because we don't have a thickness on our grass leaves. Normally in nature everything has some kind of thickness and the sun shines through it, that we can simulate with subsurface scattering. And as you all know, if you hold a grass leaf against the sun, you can see a little bit through it, or at least the sun shines a little bit through it and spends some light on objects under the grass leaf. But we can't use subsurface scattering because we have no depth in our grass leaf. That's why we use a translucent node and with backfacing. That means that first the backfacing gives the back of our grass leaf. So the one side has that color and the back side of our grass leaf has a little bit different, slightly a little bit different color. It's a little bit different in the saturation, and also we gave it some translucent node shader so that it's a little bit translucent, and that all comes together in a mix shader. You can play with the values until you have something that fits for you at the best. And on the other hand, we have a noise texture going into a bump node, and we also give the grass leaf a little bit of bump, but I think you can't see that at all, or only if you look very closely to your grass. So that's my green grass material. Back to our geometry nodes, I deactivate the temporary material plane and we are going back to our leaf. So first of all, I think we can make a group around that. Control J, and we will name that grass thickness. By the way, hitting N, you can close and open the panel. Now it's time to copy these that grass leaf, so we can so we get a bunch of grass leaves and have a grass leaf group. So first of all, we are going to set our group output a little bit to the right. And now we need a distribute points on faces node, of course. The distribute points on faces node we can only use if we have something that we where we can distribute our grass leaf. And therefore we will create some grid. It will be later on invisible. And that grid will be some plane where we distribute our grass group. So that's our grid, and because we want to work in real world measurements, we gave it a size of 0.1 and 0.1 and maybe vertices resolution 10 by 10. Now we need a Z position node, and that goes right into, I think I will move that right here, and that all goes into our distribute on points on face node. And of course we have to connect our set material node. That's the end of our grass leaf node collection. That will be our instances, and we will need instance on points node. And now our grass leaf instance just goes into our instance, and the instance on points node goes into our geometry. So now we can see nothing because we forgot to connect that with our points, and we still can see nothing because we have a very small area and we have to increase our density a lot. Let's increase that to 10,000, and we think we have to increase the size of our plane. So maybe we can go with 0.03 and 0.03, and as you can see, now there's space for some more grass leaves, and now we can begin to make them distribute more randomly. And to do that we will need of course a random value, and first of all we are going to set the rotation to random. So we will need a random value node that we set to vector, and we plug that into our rotation, and as you can see our grass leaves already begin to rotate. So of course mainly we want to rotate our grass leaves around the z-axis, but to give it some variation in it, we can also let them rotate around the x-axis. And as you can see, we have now some grass leaves. They're looking a little bit strange. Maybe we can change that by changing the rotation a little bit, something like that. And maybe we can set the count down to 7 so that it looks a little bit more like grass leaf, like that. Back to our rotation. And of course we want to control the scale of our grass leaves. We want to give them a little bit more variety. Again, we will need a random value node. This time we can set it to float and plug that into our scale, and now we can define the minimum and the maximum height of our grass leaves. Now that looks pretty good, but of course we still need some random variations in it. And to create that, first of all we create a frame around it, Control J, and we name it grass group. And to give a little bit more noise and randomness to our grass group, we go back to our mesh bending group, and we will now need again another vector rotate node. We can duplicate that we will need a random value node. We can leave that at float, and we will need a math node that we set to add. So now what we are going to do now is to add some additional rotation to, but not to the x-axis, but we want to rotate the grass leaves around the z-axis. So we can set this to z-axis, and now we can move that a little bit to the left. And now we plug the vector output into that vector input, and that one goes into rotation. So the way is a little bit longer now. And we plug that one into the upper add value and the random into the lower one, and that goes into our angle. So what this node tree does is just adding some more randomness to the normal randomness, and the randomness goes around the z-axis, and the amount of randomness will be defined by that math node here. So we can now define the randomness of our grass, and with that node we can define the banding. That one will define the length of our grass leaves. It looks a little bit distorted now, so we add at the end a subdivision surface node. Subdivision surface node. We can leave that at 1, and now it already looks like a grass. Maybe we can set the density a little bit higher, maybe with 15, or maybe we can increase the size of our grid. So we can even go a little bit higher, maybe something like that, because grass group is not only centered in one point, so now our density is too high. Let me add another math node, sorry, so that we have better control about that parameter here, and we will set that to multiply with 1000, and now we have much better control about it. Maybe we go with that. That looks good, and here maybe 0.15. I think that's okay. That looks like some grass. I think it's okay. And now that we have our grass, we can bend it and rotate it a little bit, and we can give it some random distortion. We have now made our green grass, and the only thing that we have to do now is connect all our parameters with our geometry input and copy our whole green grass group. I will frame that. Control J, and that whole thing is our green grass group. So now we have to copy that whole thing and to make our brown grass, but first of all we have to connect our inputs with our group input so that we have control outside of geometry nodes, have control of our grass. So we are going to add this value here, and we name it, where is it? N, oh, it's very small, and we name that bending factor. What else do we got? We have this one here. We can call that green grass length, and the other one is green grass bending factor. I think GG is better. Green grass length, and we got that one here, green grass distortion. What else we got? We've got that one here, that's the height, so therefore we need a combine XYZ node that goes right into here, 0.09, and we only need the Z channel, so that we will name height. And what else do we got? We've got of course the density. Long way to left. Green grass density. So, and I think there's only left two parameters, the minimum size and the maximum size. So we connect it here. Green grass minimum size, and we've got the green grass maximum size. Green grass maximum size, and I think we can also add the seed. That's probably helpful, and name that green grass seed. Now we have control in our modifier panel of one of our grass groups, and now we can copy that whole thing with Shift D, duplicate it, and now we the only thing we have to do now is connect all these sockets that we connected here with the group input, and we will change the material. We will take procedural brown grass. Let's have a quick look at our brown grass. Procedural brown grass, where do we have it? There it is. So basically it's exactly, we can delete that. It's exactly the same as our green grass. Texture coordinate, mapping, gradient texture, noise texture and bump, color ramp, geometry, node with backfacing, the saturation node, translucent, goes into the principled shader, into the mix shader, and into the material output. And now I can give you the color of the colors of the brown grass. We have the bright one, it's F1DCA7, a little bit darker, it's D2A677. You can play with it until you get a result that satisfies you. Back to our geometry node. So I'm gonna skip that part where I connect all the sockets again, and will jump right into the part where everything is connected. So now I have connected all the sockets for the brown grass, and just sorted my frames a little bit better and gave them some colors. Now you should have something like that. All the parameters for the green grass and all the parameters for the brown grass. And let's switch to our 3D viewport. you should now have something similar to that. By the way, I'm using a sky texture object. Let's jump into that, into the world, and you can use the sky texture and play with it with the background. Normally the sun is too intense at 1, so I always get it down to 0.2 or 3, something like that. And I always increase the sun size, so because I don't like the sharp shadows, I like it a little bit more smooth. But that's not the main topic here. Back to our geometry nodes. Now we can add some brown grass, and to do that we add a join geometry node just here at the end. Connect the green grass with our join geometry, and we will connect the brown grass. And at the moment we can't see anything because they have exactly the same values. But when we change our seed, you see we have brown grass and green grass, and now we can start to edit our first grass group. Normally the brown grass is a little bit thinner than the green grass, and we can increase, we can change that by editing the values, maybe something like that, and that one goes more into the dark, so it's thinner, something like that. And it's normally it's a little bit smaller, and the density is less, so we can play with our density, make it much smaller, and we can decrease the height, so something like that maybe. That looks pretty cool. And now here comes the fun part. We can create a new group. The group we can name grass, and put our first geometry nodes grass group into the collection. And now we can duplicate our grass, or to say better, to copy. The difference between copy and duplicate is when I copy now my grass group, I have a different geometry node setup. When I duplicate the geometry nodes group, I have the same geometry node setup. So I could control with one geometry node setup 2 groups, but we don't want that. We want different grass groups. So to achieve that, hit Control C to copy it, and Control V to paste it in. And now we have 2 separate grass groups. And now we can edit our second one. Maybe we can bend it a little bit less, like that. We can make it smaller and decrease the density. Of course, the density of our brown grass, and we could change the seed so that we have something totally different. And now you can continue, and the more varieties you have, the more realistic it will look later on. Some bending, some distortion. Can increase the height. Oh, it's so much. That looks weird. So we have to decrease the height of our brown grass and the length. So for my videos you saw in the intro, I created 6 different grass groups. For the sake of the tutorial, we can go now with 3. That should be enough. And the next part will be that we create our grid, our landscape, where we can put our grass on. And to create our landscape, we will create another cube, and the cube we will use as geometry node container. So create a new geometry node setup, and it's important it has to be outside that grass collection, of course, and we rename it geometry node landscape, and we will create a grid with for the start 10 to 10 meters and with a resolution of maybe 200 by 200, and we will need a set position node. And so we don't see our grass assets later on. We grab them and move them down in the x-axis, in the z-axis, sorry. Now back to our geometry nodes landscape. Now we want some distortion. Therefore we will create a noise texture node, an RGB curves node, a vector math node, vector math node that we set to add, or we can leave it at add. It's the standard parameter. And now we need a position node and of course a combine x, y, z node. So now we can plug in factor output into the color input. And the scale we can set to maybe 0.1. The color goes into the Z channel because we want to affect the Z values of each point. And to get the position of each vertex of our grid, we have that position node that goes into the upper vector input, and the Z noise goes into the lower one, and that whole thing we plug into offset. And as you can see, we have already some distortion. You can play now with the RGB curve values to get some slight variations in it. You can play with the height, with a factor. We can something like that, or a little bit higher, maybe. Yes, you can play with your own values. That's the landscape I will go now. And now we want to distribute our grass groups on our landscape. No, sorry, first of all, we have to give it a material. And the material, we will need a set material node. I used I think the procedural try correct ground. Let's have a quick look at it. Something like that. I did not create the material by myself. I used the Blender Kit add-on. For those of you who don't know it, it's an add-on where you can download free models and materials, scenes, HRIs and brushes, and with a paid account you can download even more. So materials, I think they're all free. You just have to type in ground, and then you will get a lot of materials with procedural textures and texture-based shaders, so you can choose between one and just drag and drop it into your scene. But for now on, we will leave with procedural try correct ground. Let's jump back to our geometry nodes. Now we have the material. We can distribute our grass group on our plane, and to do that we need a distribute points on faces node. Of course, we will need an instance on points node. and we connect the geometry with our mesh and the points with our points. And of course we will need a join geometry node to combine the instances and our plane. And now we can just drag and drop our grass collection into our scene. So now be aware of that you activate separate children, reset children, and pick instance. And you never know if your scene is going to crash or not. Just type in a very low density. And as you can see, we got already some grass. Of course, now we can increase the density a little bit. And now it's time to get some variations in it. Again, we need a random value for our scale. We can leave that at float, plug that into scale, and set the minimum size and the maximum size. And to align the grass to the normals of your map, you can use a rotate Euler node. Just plug that right in between the distribute points on faces node and the instance on points node, and plug the normal into the rotation and the rotation output into that rotation. And you can see the normals, the grass groups are orientated now on the normals of the plane, but now they all look too similar, and we need rotate them randomly. We set that random value to vector, and now we only want to rotate the z-axis. We can give it a slightly random rotation on the two other axes, but the main rotation should happen on the z-axis. And I think when we type in tau, that will give us a maximum rotation. And now we have to combine the rotate Euler node and the random value node, and we can do that with an vector mass node that we set to add. And now we only have to plug in that one in the upper one and the random value into the lower one, and that goes into the rotation, and we got some cool rotated grass. Now we can crank up the density, maybe something like that, and we can go higher. To improve the workflow and the render speed, the workflow speed, you can see it's very slow now. You can go to, well, first of all, I'm going to decrease the density. We'll go with 10. And now you select your grass group and go to object properties, to the viewport display, and change it from textured to bounce. Do that with the other one too. Textured to bounce. Textured to bounce. You can realize now that we won't have the full amount of our polygons and vertices. They're only shown each grass leaf, but that's still not enough. We want to reduce our polygons that are shown in the viewport, and we can reduce that by going again into our grass group. We should maybe have done that before, and go right at the end of your grass group and plug in a realize instance node. And as you can see, it only displays now the boundary of the whole group and not all single instances. You can do that with every group, or maybe you do that next time before you copy or duplicate all your groups. Now the last one. And now, as you can see, we have a very fast viewport that we can edit. Now back to our geometry nodes. Where is it? There it is. And now we can set a higher distribution, something like that. And to make it complete, the only thing we have to do now is to add some gaps in the grass. And to do that, we will need a noise texture and a color ramp. Plug in the factor into the color and the color into the selection. And now when you change the color ramp, you see that you have some gaps in the grass. You can change the size of the gaps by changing the size of your noise texture. So maybe something like that, because I think on a normal meadow or lawn you don't have that uniform distribution of grass. So now we have some pretty realistic looking grass without any image texture. When you want to add some particles, you can watch my particle tutorial. I will put a link in the description below. Then you have something like in the intro animation, and of course you can add some flowers, rocks, or stones. You can download these assets from Blender Kit, or you can use your own assets. I hope you learned something and enjoyed the tutorial. Hope I see you next time. Bye.